Hello, Spookies, and welcome to Rick or Treat Horrorcast, hosted by yours ghoulie, Ricky J. Duarte. My guest today is a Los Angeles-based social media sensation who also works in TV, mainly the world of game shows. He's a lifelong fan of horror and the supernatural, and started his ScreamKingKyle TikTok account about a year ago to connect and nerd out with fellow genre lovers. This TikTok account has over 13,000 followers and offers humorous and insightful commentary on our beloved horror genre. Please welcome to the podcast, Kyle Poppert.
Yay! Hello, hello. How are you?
Man, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited to have you on the show. You have no idea.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Also, the fact that you taglined me as an internet sensation. I'm gonna go tell my parents. This is so exciting. I've made it.
You've made it on a C-list podcast. You have been named an internet sensation.
No, this is A-list as far as I'm concerned. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We have followed one another on the socials for a while now, and I'm really excited to get on the podcast and get to talk about a incredibly fun movie together. This was a great choice. I'm really glad you brought it to me.
Thank you so much. I'm ready for the Kiki. I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, I'd love to kind of let my listeners get to know you a little bit and have a little talk. And I thought today we're talking The Mummy, the 1999 version from our childhoods that shaped us as horror fans and Brendan Fraser fans, and so
queer people.
And this movie is not queer at all, and yet it reads queer.
It's the gayest movie I've ever seen in my entire life, and that was not its intention. It's like gayer than like Brokeback Mountain, and I will stand for
that. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. There's that meme that goes around that shows all of like our four lead characters, and it's like this film like shaped bisexual identity in all of us. It's a very sexy cast. Well, all right. So speaking of the cast, Rachel Weisz, who obviously stars in this film, this was her breakout role. She has said she's not a fan of horror, and she actually does not call this a horror film. She used the word hokum to describe it, which kind of means nonsense. And she feels that this film takes place in a comic book world. I wanted to talk to you about kind of like the boundaries of horror and where it meets with other genres, because I have this discussion sometimes when people will say something like, I hate horror, I can't sit through horror movies, they disgust me. And I'm like, well, I feel like horror can pop up in unexpected places. Like if you think of Sleeping Beauty, right, the scene when Maleficent is kind of the glowing orb in the fireplace and her like spooky eyes draw Princess Aurora through the corridor to the spindle, like that's a horror scene. That's terrifying.
It's so scary. A lot of the old Disney movies are terrifying. Like Snow White is honestly like scary. Like I had a harder time watching that movie as a kid than I did watching like Halloween or It. Like Snow White scared the crap out of me. So sorry, I cut you off, but continue.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly where I wanted to go. And maybe we can get into introductory horror as well, because I think this film, especially with the ages that you and I were, assuming you might be a little younger than me, but like similar in age, I feel like this would have been like a great shaper of our tastes. How do you feel about horror popping up in not just a slasher, not just a ghost story, not just an exorcism movie?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great question. And I've always kind of felt like, yes, there's kind of the stereotypical horror genre that we all know and love, where you have, of course, kind of like I mentioned, you have your Halloween, your Screams, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, like things that are more stereotypical horror. But my kind of like baseline for is it a horror movie? I'm like, are you scared? I'm like, were you scared during that? Are you uncomfortable? Were you at the edge of your seat? Like, I kind of feel like horror also, like what is scary changes so much over time. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly. Like, for example, like I think of Jaws, for example. Like Jaws to many people in this world is like the scariest movie they've ever seen in their life. But to an audience today, like putting the kind of practical effects and what they look like aside, just the plot line of a shark, I don't think would resonate with young audiences today the
Mhm.
way it did, when that movie came out. So horror is subjective and horror changes over time. So I'm always kind of at the thought of like, there's a lot of movies that really upset me and stayed with me and kind of gave me nightmares that aren't really horror movies, or are, like I said, or like kids movies that just have horror scenes in them that for some reason were just so much more impactful to me than some of the movies that were, straight horror the whole way through. Like I use Snow White as an example, scared the shit out of. Oh, am I allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way?
Absolutely.
Oh, fuck yes. All right. No, I remember I used to have to leave the room. Like I used to have to leave the room as a kid when the witch transforms, or when the queen transforms into a witch.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch that as a kid because that was so scary. And I'm like, to me, even now I watch it, I'm like, this is so scary. Like, and or this is a really deep cut reference, but there is a movie called, I was a big Wizard of Oz fan growing up. And have you seen Return to Oz?
Of course, I've seen Return to Oz.
Yes.
Veruza Balk, come on.
Yes, of course. I figured I'm kind of talking to the right audience here, so this is
Yeah.
perfect. But the wheelies scared, like I wouldn't call
Yeah.
Return to Oz a horror movie, but that movie is terrifying. And who's to say it's not a horror movie? Actually, I shouldn't even say that, but it's not like I don't think it'd be labeled at Blockbuster as a horror movie. I think it'd be a kids movie, but that movie is terrifying.
It is. And actually let's stay on this track with Disney because that's a Disney film. And
Yeah.
they're up until frankly maybe the last 20 years, Disney wasn't afraid to go dark and wasn't
Yeah.
afraid to explore kind of more frightening spaces. I have used this example recently. So we all know Splash Mountain has closed down. It's
Mm.
time. Like I had my fun on that ride when I was a kid, but it's problematic and I'm ready to say goodbye. It's being
Yeah.
replaced with Tiana's Bayou Adventure based on The Princess and the Frog. She's my favorite princess. I cannot
Yeah.
wait to ride this ride. There's one thing that's happening in it that I have read about that I it's so at the end of quote Splash Mountain when you're going up the hill and it's scary and Brer Rabbit is tied up and you think that he's going to get eaten and it's a very scary moment. And I remember as a kid it felt like a rite of passage. It was a feeling of fear, right? Now that moment is going to be showcased as a celebration and it's going to be exciting and fun and they don't want to scare the kids and again, so excited for this ride. But I feel like trying to shield kids from something that's frightening maybe does them a disservice. If you can experience fear is a natural emotion. It's the first emotion we feel when we come out of the womb, right? We start screaming
Yeah.
and crying. And I feel like if you can allow children to experience fear in a safe environment with perhaps their family, then they might be better able to handle it when it's actually time to be afraid. And listen, I'm never going to have kids. I don't have kids. I would be a terrible parent. But I do feel like, sometimes we are a society that's a little overprotective now of things that might, people throw around the word traumatizing when really maybe the word disturbing might be a little more appropriate, right? Trauma is a real thing. Trauma is like a medical diagnosis. Throwing that word around is
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they'll survive Splash Mountain. I'm pretty sure they will not have trauma. Okay. I think they'll
yeah,
be okay.
yeah,
No, I actually totally agree. And it's funny that we start using the Disneyland reference because I actually was just at Disneyland on Tuesday.
nice.
So
Are you a Disney gay also?
I like to classify, I love Disneyland. I don't know if I can classify as a full Disney adult because I'm not like going every single day and I don't have a pass, but I go
Right.
like maybe once or twice a year and I
Okay.
really love it. So I'm like halfway there. Um, but I was actually had this conversation with my friends at the park the other day because, in Fantasyland there, they've changed a lot. Like Pinocchio ride used to be terrifying. Also,
Mhm.
another terrifying Disney movie.
Yeah.
But that ride, like you got swallowed by a whale and got turned into a donkey on that ride, basically. And then there was also the Snow White's, literally called Snow White's Scary Adventure,
Mhm.
which, that one has, the witch, like the whole thing I was just talking about, the stepmother and all that stuff. And they've changed both those rides now, and they're very like now it's like I don't know what the title of Snow White's called. It's called like Snow White's Magical Story or something like
Snow White's
that.
Enchanted Wish.
That's right.
You are talking to a verified Disney adult.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Then yes, I will go to you. You're gonna be my encyclopedia. But yes, and I'm kind of like a part of me is like I had this conversation. why can't they just be scared? First of all,
Yeah.
the ride literally said on it, Snow White's Scary Adventure.
Right.
So if you don't know it's gonna be scary going in, that's your own damn fault if you get on it and you're scared. Also, I think the kids gotta live. Like, just let them be scared for a 2-minute ride. They might cry for a second. I don't know. Maybe this is just me being insensitive, but the ride's been there traumatizing kids for 50 years.
Yeah.
I think we all have grown up to be successful adults, most of us anyway. And I just think it's part of the fun, like that's part of going to a theme park. That's part of seeing movies. That's part of growing up is finding out what you like and what you don't like and what scares you and what doesn't scare you. And like I said, horror is subjective. So something that's gonna scare one kid won't scare the other, and people have different tolerances for it. But it seems a little I'm not a big fan of the watering down of the scary stuff. And like you said, a lot of the new Disney movies coming out now are scared to even go there at all. Even the movies like the golden age of Disney in like the 90s, like they were even like they had some darker stuff going on in that time as well. It's just lately this new generation of Disney films has been, like I said, watered down a little bit.
I do appreciate their approach to showcasing villains who are not necessarily obviously evil people. Like in Encanto, there's not really a villain. If there is one, it might be Abuela, but that film's more about generational kind of not generational trauma, but just kind of bestowing your descendants with what you were raised on, right? And so it's a complicated relationship. She's certainly not a villain, but she has a lesson to learn. And I think even in Frozen, the villain is not made super apparent. And even by the time he's kind of a throwaway. Like the point of that film is not him being evil, it's the relationship between the sisters. So I do appreciate this approach, right? I also just kind of
Yeah.
miss the evil, scary sea witch who has a great song.
100%, 100%. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And even like, for example, like I think one of the best villains I've seen come out of like a more quote unquote recent Disney film, I guess, let's say, which I know Tangled didn't come out yesterday, but I love the mother in that movie. And
Yes.
she's not scary at all. She's funny. Like it's like a funny character, but she has such a great song with Mother Knows Best, and she's
Yeah.
so funny. I have a hard time not picturing like Susan Sarandon playing that role.
Oh, she looks like, yeah, I see
Yeah,
it
I
for
mean,
sure.
I'm like, that had to be on the Pinterest board somewhere for that character.
That's hilarious. And we love Donna Murphy, Broadway legend, voicing
Yes,
her. She gets that fabulous
100%.
song.
Yeah, so I do appreciate like the kind of sillier fun villains that you can have a good time with, but yeah, like there's not a whole lot of dark villains going on anymore.
I think the more recent Haunted Mansion film took it to a scarier place than I expect. I loved the new Haunted Mansion film. I thought it was
I actually
excellent.
haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet.
Highly recommend. It's still not exactly what I want. I'm a Haunted Mansion junkie. Like my whole
Yeah.
apartment is but it's still not exactly what I wanted from a Haunted Mansion movie, but it's perfectly cast. It touches on grief and trauma in a way that's approachable for kids, and the ghosts are scary. And I thought that was a really cool move for Disney because they just don't do that anymore.
Did you like the Eddie Murphy version?
So no, but it's one that I will turn it on every once in a while because I am an Eddie Murphy fan. Jennifer
Yes.
Tilly as Madame Leota was perfect
Oh
casting.
God,
Like
so
Jamie
good.
Lee Curtis plays her in the new one, and she has this weird accent. I'm not sure what she was doing. She's very well cast, but it's just I will watch the Eddie Murphy one every once in a while, hoping that it's going to be better this time, and it just never is. It's poorly written.
Yeah.
Like Eddie Murphy's hilarious all the time. It's just not a great script, and yeah,
It
it's
might be one of those things where I think I was young when it came out and I saw it in theaters. So it's not necessarily one of my favorites, but I remember really liking it. But that might be more of like a nostalgia thing. Like
right,
it's just
right.
I used to watch as a kid. So, sometimes you have to kind of separate. You're like, is it actually a good movie or do I just like it because I saw it when I was 9?
I
Like,
know. And then if you revisit as an adult, you may or may not be disappointed.
yeah, I think it might maybe this is a sign for me to revisit it.
Right, right, right. Well, listen, because we're both in social media, I also want to talk about social media and horror and its
Mhm.
presence, especially like things like YouTube. There's a lot of censorship happening recently. Like my podcast gets docked if I talk too much about like unaliving or or
Yeah.
there are flags for certain words on social media. Where do you face any of that on TikTok? I know TikTok's a lot more free.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, they put those like I started doing these videos recently where I was like, I do this like I mean, it's not I didn't come up with this. A lot of people do this, but like the point of view, you're a Victorian child on the street, and I'm just showing you one of my like crazy bad shit horror, my favorite horror scenes. So it doesn't take my video down, but it'll do that thing where it won't show the preview on my profile. It'll say like age restriction or whatever. Because if
Wow.
I show like a gory scene, or like if you're swiping through the feed, it'll when the video swipes up, it'll say like viewer discretion advised. Do you still want to watch? If it shows like, because the videos I'm showing, I guess they've decided. Like I showed a clip from Evil Dead the other day. I do get that. All right. Maybe not everyone wants to be scrolling through casually on TikTok and see Mia splitting the devil's head open with a chainsaw. But so they'll do sometimes like that to me. They'll put like a little warning, so you have to like go through one more step to watch my video, which doesn't bother me that much. But it's hard, I think, with TikTok is that I know that they have certain words that like I think the system just auto like censors, but I don't really know what those words are, and they're not
Mhm.
very transparent about it as far as I know. Like I've tried to like go online and find a list of words that they won't let you say. And I haven't really found a source that's been helpful. So like I know like if I say like kill or murder or die, like sometimes just to be extra safe, I'll like do like the little abbreviations. Like for murder, I'll put like threes in instead of e's, or for die, I'll put an exclamation point in just so that the system won't flag it.
Yeah.
But then other times I've gotten to do it and won't do anything. And so it's like I don't know what their words are. Like I wish they're a little bit more transparent so that I could know I don't want to like disrupt their system. I'll just work around it. So
Yeah.
I've had stuff like that pop up. Yeah.
I have started when I edit this podcast, I will go through and I will timestamp when certain words are said, and then when it's transferred to YouTube, those will just be muted. Like I had a guest, and we recently talked about revenge subgenre in horror and kind of what
Yeah.
that where it comes from, what it stands for, like what does it contribute, what does it not contribute, and realized then like, oh, I really need to like be aware of what is going on these these videos, because they're going to get docked if they're not censored, but they're also important conversations to have.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because also they seem to be more like TikTok. I don't know much about YouTube. I haven't posted on YouTube, so I don't know much about the restrictions. But with TikTok, they seem to be more lenient on like the gore and blood and death
Mm-hmm.
versus like anything having to do with sex. So like one time I was like doing like a series of videos about like the worst lines ever said in horror movies. And a couple people commented on one of my videos like, "Oh, you've got to do Your Tits Are Stupendous" from the Friday the 13th remake, from
Yeah.
that like great one of the crazy many like porno sex scenes in that movie. And so I was going to record that scene, but when he says that, it's a close up on the guy's face, so you can't even see the girl naked on top of him. But I think because I recorded it, said my tits are stupendous, it like right away when I uploaded it, like on TikTok, you can tell that you've been banned or not banned, but you can tell your video's been flagged if it's been up for, let's say, 20 minutes and you have 0 views. It
Yeah.
probably means that something in the video was flagged. And so I waited. I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait an hour, and if they don't approve it, I'm just gonna delete it. And yeah, they never got approved. And I was like, okay, so I can't have my tits are stupendous on my TikTok, but again, sawing someone's head off with a chainsaw is totally fine. So I don't know
It's
where the line is with TikTok.
That's like growing up in my house. We could watch almost any bloody, scary horror movie, but as soon as someone took their top off, we turned it off. Like it's so backward. It's like
Yeah,
sex should not be shamed, and we should have maybe a little more discretion on what we show our children when it comes to murder.
right. Well, I've talked about this before, but I had divorced parents. So my parents divorced when I was like 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally worked that system. I was like, look, I know what my mom's gonna let me do, what my dad's not gonna let me do. So my dad was always much more lenient with like the action and the gore and getting me an R-rated movie at Blockbuster or whatever. And my mom didn't like that so much, but was more lenient in terms of like sex and dirty jokes. And like she let me watch all the scary movie franchise, from a young age. So she was more like lenient about letting me see naked bodies and sex. And my dad was more lenient about seeing me get people's like arms chopped off. So
Yeah,
I knew I would go to Blockbuster. I'm like, that's more of a dad's house movie. That's more of a mom's house movie. So I would work the system and just like get to watch every movie I wanted by just on weekends with mom. I got to watch the dirtier rom-coms, at weekends with dads. I got to watch all the Saw movies.
nice. All right, you got a little bit of everything then.
Yeah, just know it's so funny, like you said, that there is this kind of, shoot them up, chop them off, it's okay. But anything with the human body is like, get away,
Yeah, yeah. I have just one more question related to social media. How do you feel social media has like begun to change and inform what the horror genre looks like? Like kind of movies, like for example, editing has changed. Quicker cuts, pacing is a lot quicker because our attention spans are shifting, they're evolving. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good example you brought up because I think that because we're so used to having everything instantly on our hand, like on our phones, like you said, it's affected kind of all media around us. So tend to be a lot quicker. Movies tend to get to the plot a lot faster, for the most part. And On one hand, I understand it because I am that victim too, where I find myself, especially if I'm alone watching a movie, I'll be picking up my phone more versus if I'm with a friend or something. So on one hand, I do get it. But on the other hand, like I sometimes feel like it's done us a great disservice for, I'm gonna use the example of when The Exorcist Believer came out.
Mhm.
I had everyone was shitting on it. Everyone said it was the worst movie of all time. Like, oh my God. And the thing I kept hearing about it is it's so boring. It's so long. And I went to the theater and I saw it and I thought the opposite. I was like, oh, this feels almost like a harken back to slower pace. I mean, the original Exorcist is kind of a slower paced movie.
Yeah.
And I just felt like they were just doing more an old school pacing, which I don't think played very well to today's audiences because they're used to action starting within 20 minutes of the movie. And I felt like Believer was making you wait for it, giving you a little glimpse and making you wait for it. You know, not that that movie was perfect, but that wasn't my complaint, was not that it felt slow to me.
Yeah.
So I do think it has harmed us in some ways where we can't separate that from, you know, maybe just a different pace that you're used to. Um, and with TikTok and horror movies, or social media and horror movies, like on one hand, for the majority of the majority, I love it and I think it's great. And I think I've found a community that I can, like you said, Amanda, like I can nerd out and kiki online with. And I found people that are just as fucked up as I am. But on the other hand, it is kind of annoying because there does seem to be like sometimes before I've seen a movie, if I see like kind of like The Exorcist, where I saw this huge influx of everyone online telling me what I should feel about it. I
Mm.
went with the lowest expectations. And I guess in that sense, it actually really, I still enjoyed it. So it didn't matter that much. But I've had experiences where I'm like, God, now when I'm watching this movie, all I hear is everyone's online chatter about this scene and that scene. I'm like, I wish that I didn't hear all this so I could form an opinion of my own without the chatter of online discourse, you know?
Yeah, it's hard when everyone feels that they're a critic. And I write for Rue Morgue magazine. I do review films, but I try to be as objective as possible, and I don't like to shit on somebody's movie,
Yeah.
because people work, you work hard, and it's I don't like to go in for a punchline. I don't want to be the funny reviewer who's just trying to get a laugh at someone's expense. But it's everyone has an opinion, and opinions are valid and subjective, and so that's
Yeah.
what I feel like, especially me as a critic or a reviewer, like. I remind myself like this is not the end all be all for an opinion on a movie. I
Right.
do tend to avoid reviews until after I've seen a movie. I
Yeah.
don't care. But and real quick, because I know we have to talk about The Mummy, but interesting that you bring up The Exorcist because I recently, well, I guess back in October, went to a screening in a theater and I had never seen it on a big screen
Oh,
before.
yeah.
And there were a surprising amount of people there who had never seen it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was impressed and surprised. It's such a still and quiet film.
Hmm.
A lot of stillness, a lot of like kind of there's very little score in it. And I was very surprised at how it drew everyone in. There was this tension in the room. Now, granted, everyone who was there went to see The Exorcist. They
Right.
wanted, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is another film, just like you mentioned, Jaws. It's another one that kind of younger generations feel is not scary anymore
Yeah.
because they've seen it. Like every exorcism movie of all time has ripped that movie off. That movie did
Right.
everything that you can possibly do, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to Believer, and I just had this conversation with my boyfriend. Sorry, Drew, we completely disagree about this film because um, I don't often do this. I refuse to see it only because the
Interesting.
new Halloween films, for me, were edited too quickly. For
Mhm.
for a franchise, David Gordon Green said he was going to go back to the original haunting feel of the first film, but I got to a point watching it where I was like, you are cutting and editing literally every 10 seconds. So there aren't those long
Mhm.
posting shots to build tension. And so for me, I was assuming that's what was going to happen in The Exorcist Believer. But now if you're saying that it doesn't, I might actually give it a chance. I don't know what to expect. It's not a movie that I'm excited about, but I feel like I
Mhm.
need to not be an asshole and just see it.
I would say I totally understand what you're saying about the Halloween cutting and editing. I would say like editing of movies is probably not my biggest forte. So
Mhm.
I like maybe I'm not the best person to judge. So I wouldn't go based off just my like
Right, right,
I
right.
off my thing. I'm like, you could be totally right. Like that's just not something I notice it when it's really bad, but that's not something I always pay attention to unless it's really obvious, if that makes sense.
I think that's the goal of an editor, not to be noticed,
I
right?
know, right? That means I get they're doing their job right. So,
Yeah.
but I know that was extra. It's always hard when you reboot a franchise that's so beloved and
Yeah.
so has such a huge following, and it's a tough job. It's a tough gig to take on. So I don't even know if they'll finish that trilogy because I know they had two more planned, and I don't know how much you could really do with an exorcism in 3 movies anyway without
No.
being repetitive. So
And David Gordon Green is no longer attached, so they don't have a director anymore.
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where that ends up.
It will be. Well, every episode, I love to make a quick recommendation about horror media that we have recently consumed. So, books or movies, TV, video games, music, comic books, anything. Have you enjoyed anything recently you want to share with the listeners?
Ooh, yes. Okay, so I'm really into podcasts. I have like 8 podcasts that I'm like obsessed with, but
Nice.
I listen to a lot of like, of course, like many horror fans, I listen to a lot of true crime, all that good stuff. But it's interesting because I got really into this podcast. It's called Spooked. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah.
It's so good. And honestly, I've been listening to it for a couple years now, but it was kind of the first podcast that I listened to in that way where it was like kind of paranormal. I hadn't really listened to like a paranormal podcast before. And I think I like it because it's like people, I don't, it could all be fake. I don't really know how they make it, but it's supposed to be true people coming on telling their stories, or maybe I can't tell if it might be actors coming and telling the stories. It sounds like real people telling their stories, but they just tell their different stories of like paranormal things that have happened to them growing up. And it was, I think, because it was such a new medium of horror for me. Like I'm so used to visually seeing things, and there's like kind of that idea that like sometimes not seeing is the scariest thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think that when I first started listening to this podcast, I'm like, wait, I've never been so scared listening to a podcast before, just hearing these people's stories. And like, I started listening to it too and from my way to work. And then I would get home and I was really on edge all the time because I'm like, I don't want to hear about the ghosts coming out of these people's closets and like the dead people they're seeing at the side of their bed. And I got really addicted. It was like a drug. Like I just couldn't stop because I was so scared, and I love being scared, which I know you understand that feeling.
I do,
A lot
yeah.
of like, public might not understand that feeling. But I was so scared by this damn podcast. And especially when the first couple weeks I was listening to it. And so I've been a fan for a couple years now. So I would say I'm a little bit more used to it now. Like now it doesn't scare me quite as much, but I love it. I think it's so well done. I will say the guy that kind of like hosts it in the beginning, he's a little cheesy. He's like got a really great radio show voice, and he usually does like a little 5 minute intro. And so I'm not gonna lie, I kind of skip past his little like he does
Okay.
like some like theme or moral of the story, and then I go right to the actual meat of the story. But the music's so creepy, the way they produced it is so scary, and I just think it's an interesting medium. Like it's kind of old school Orson Welles, right? And I'm just like listening to this radio show basically on my phone, and
Nice.
I'm scared by it.
Okay. I'm gonna get into that for sure. I've been, I just caught up on all my podcasts, and so it's time for another one. I'm gonna get into Spooked.
Yeah,
I've heard
it's
great
good. It's
things.
really good, especially especially like the early seasons that they did. They actually do a whole that's actually how I found it is you have a shining blanket there on your couch I can see
I do.
behind you, and
Yeah.
the overlook. And my brother actually sent me I found the podcast because my brother sent me an episode about people who stayed at the Stanley Hotel, which of course is where Stephen King stayed and inspired him to write The Shining. So there was these people coming on telling their experience about staying at the Stanley Hotel. And that's how I first heard about the podcast. Because me and my brother went and explored the Stanley Hotel together. So he was like, you got to listen to this podcast. They saw way more than we did. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I got really into the series after that. So Spooked, it's really good.
I'll check it out. I also would love to go to the Stanley Hotel and
Oh,
see that.
amazing.
It looks gorgeous.
It was gorgeous. It was so fun. Even from just an architectural and history standpoint, it was really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my recommendation this week is not new to me. I actually really love this film. This is one of my comfort films, like those movies that you put on when it's kind of you're getting sleepy and you don't want to go to bed yet, but you want to watch
Yeah.
something cozy and
Something
familiar.
familiar. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's The Company of Wolves. Have you seen this?
No, I've never heard of this. Tell me about it.
Okay, it is, I'm going to say maybe 1986, 87. It is based on the book The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. So that book is a anthology of fairy tales that have been rewritten from a feminist perspective.
Hmm.
And one of the stories is the story of Little Red Riding Hood with werewolves.
Oh.
And so Angela Carter wrote the screenplay, I believe, for this film adaptation, and she makes adjustments to it that are really cool. So it works still as an anthology with a great wraparound story. And Angela Lansbury plays the granny,
Oh,
and she's
I'm in.
fucking great. She's
I'm
it's just
in.
it's cool to see her in a horror film because we know her. She was in Sweeney Todd, and other than that, I mean, Murder She Wrote is about murder, but it's not scary. It's she relishes this role, and it's directed by Neil Jordan, who he went on to do Interview with the Vampire. So it's got that really beautiful. His films are so lush looking, right?
Yes, rich.
This
Yeah.
spooky enchanted forest is just beautifully decorated and great performance by a young actress. I can't remember her name. It was really one of the only films that she ever did. And the story of Little Red Riding Hood is technically about menstruation and becoming a woman, and this film really explores that. Some really incredible and unique werewolf transformation scenes in ways that we don't
Oh,
see. Just unique takes,
yeah.
great practical effects, and it feels like a scary fairy tale. And I'm dying to do an episode about it. But in the meantime, listeners and Kyle, go check this movie out. It might still be on Shudder right now, but it's cozy and pretty to look at.
And can you say the title one more time? A Company of Wolves, you said?
The Company of Wolves.
A
Yeah.
Company of Wolves. Okay, no, that sounds like everything I love, so I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah. High recommend. Well, listen, we came here to discuss a chosen film. What do you say we go Rick or treating?
Let's go trick or treating. I'd love to.
Right. Today we are talking The Mummy, the 1999 remake, reboot before reboot was a thing, directed by Stephen Sommers, who did Deep Rising, Van Helsing, which I love that movie. I know it bombed. I think it's a lot of fun. And then, of course, he directed the first sequel, The Mummy Returns, and The Ride, The Mummy at Universal. And then, did you ever see the live action Jungle Book from the 90s? I think Carrie Elways was in it, and maybe Sam
I
Neill.
I honestly, it's ringing a bell that I may have watched it as like a 4-year-old, but I have not seen it in 20 something years, probably.
Got it. Yeah. Well, he did some really great action adventure movies. A screenplay by Stephen Sommers and Lloyd Fonvielle and Kevin Jar. Interesting that when it was first discussed that the Mummy was going to be remade, it was actually passed around to horror writers. Clive Barker took a stab at a screenplay. Mick Garris and George Romero, they were all approached about remaking The Mummy, and then it kind of fell into Stephen Sommers' hands, who had the Indiana Jones action adventure idea, and then that's where it headed.
Wow, I did not know that. Okay, I'm excited. This is so cool.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting just because we talked a little bit about horror blending into other genres, and I think that this is a perfect example of how a movie can be scary but also fun but also action packed and humorous, and I think that this movie blends all of that flawlessly.
100%. That's one of the reasons I love it is because it is kind of a mosh posh of like 10 different genres and tones. And
Yeah.
I love it. It's funny. When the second you said that he directed Van Helsing, and I actually was like doing a little IMDb dive the other day on this movie as well, I saw that and I didn't connect that he had also directed that. Now that I know that though, I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like they're very sister films in terms of style and tone.
this movie is crowd pleaser to the max. Like, it's so well paced. It's like just over 2 hours, and it doesn't stop moving. Right?
Mm,
It's just like there's no time wasted. I think it's a really
no.
solid screenplay. I love reading Roger Ebert's reviews of movies because I hate his opinions on movies so much. But I did appreciate what he said about this, and I don't agree with it, but I appreciate his ability to look past his own snottiness. He's like, the
Okay.
script isn't good, the directing's not great, acting's not terrific, but he used the word, he said, I was cheered throughout. And he was
Okay.
like, I can't trash this movie because I was cheered and entertained. And I was like, all right, I don't agree. I do think that it's well directed and acted. And, I think that the script is a lot of fun, but
Mhm.
like, cheered. Like, it's just
Yeah.
a fun experience,
It is. I think this movie that is such a, I mean, if you want to put it at a like base level, fun is just a great word to describe this movie. I'm like,
Yeah.
it is by definition a fun movie. And this movie means so much to me because I like was obsessed with this movie as a kid. It was like one of the 5 movies I just had on repeat as a kid. I even had this like like the score. My parents bought me the score on a CD, and I would listen to the score on like road trips because I loved it so much. I
Nice.
would like I was like a little, of course, a very little gay kid outside. And I would like watch this movie and then go reenact it in my backyard and play all the characters. And I especially loved, of course, being Rachel Weisz, and I love being Evie. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, wanted to be Evie because she was so pretty, and also mostly because I was pretending to have Brendan Fraser come and save me. That's how I knew he was definitely like my first gay crush. Was I
Yeah.
was like looking back with some like once I started going through puberty, I was like, oh, I think I did that because I definitely wanted to marry him. It's like I think there was a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this movie. It is such a good time. And it holds to me, it holds up. Like to me, I would say like this movie, I was watching it last night and this morning, and like it feels almost to me like I mean, I know at this point it's 25 years old.
Yeah.
But it feels kind of like a modern day old Hollywood movie. Like you look at the
Mm.
sets, and obviously it takes place in the 30s, 20s,
26, I think
20. Yeah.
1926. I have it written in my synopsis. We'll get there.
Yeah, and I feel like obviously this movie takes place in the 20s, but it feels just like style-wise, like a harken back to like old Hollywood in terms of the big giant sets and the sweeping scores and the leading hunk and like the damsel in distress. Like it kind of has a lot of classic Hollywood beats
Yes.
that we don't necessarily get a lot now of. It does, we don't have those kind of big sweeping epics as much anymore. And so every time I watch this movie, I'm like, oh God, this just feels like Hollywood at its best here. Like this is storytelling. This is a fun movie.
Yeah. Well, and funny that you bring up the old Hollywood feel of it because Brendan Fraser was cast. George of the Jungle was a decent success, and his performance in that is what caught Stephen Sommers' eye. He compared him to Errol Flynn and kind of that charisma and his like heroism and his handsomeness, but not like too self-serious. Felt
Yes,
like he could
that's a
carry the
perfect word.
comedy, and he's perfectly cast in this. He has said he would love to return to the series. This movie, or maybe it was the second or third one, did injure him and left him with like kind of permanent injuries, and so that contributed to his, I mean, among obviously other bigger issues, contributed to his kind of removal from Hollywood. But he has said he would be more than happy to return as Rick in a Mummy reboot, which I think would be very well received.
100%. I think you have to get both of them though, because look, I'm not trying to shade Maria Bello as a
Right.
actress, but when they put that swap in, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I was
Yeah.
like, I still saw it and I like parts of the third one, but I hate when movies do that, and especially with a movie that is so like I'm so into.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me to like fully connect to that movie because they replaced Rachel. Um, but yeah, I would totally be down if they wanted, like, I mean, I think that would be so well received. And I think Brendan is so perfect in this role because he's so like he's kind of like a himbo. I was thinking about that. I'm like, he is
Yes.
like what we would call today a himbo, like kind of like a dumb jock with a heart of gold and loyal and brave and a little silly, but still very like machismo kind of like
Yeah.
he's got all these, he does it really well. Like he plays that part so well. He's just perfect.
Yeah, completely. And Rachel, she didn't return for the third one. I think it was scheduling, and her career was starting to go in a different direction. She obviously
Yeah.
took a more dramatic approach to her career, but God, to get her back with Brendan, God, it would have been great. I will tell you. So the film obviously spawned The Mummy Returns, which introduced us to the Scorpion King and the worst moment of CGI in recorded history,
That
which
is just the
then
legacy of that movie, unfortunately, is
oh my
that
God. It's a fun movie. And that spawned its own spin-off in a couple of directed videos. But um I remember The Mummy Returns vividly. I could not tell you a single thing about the third mummy. Is it the
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
yeah, I don't remember a damn thing about it. And I know I've seen it.
It's yeah. I mean, again, there's things about it that are cool. Like
Mhm.
I think the idea of it taking place, outside of, an Egyptian theme is pretty cool. The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, I think, is a neat idea. And I just know they have a really great like car chase scene, kind of similar to they do in the first one where fireworks are going off and
Cool.
all this stuff in China. And like it's pretty cool. But overall, it lacked a little bit of the kind of the magic that the first one and even the second one had too.
Yeah. Well, the chemistry between Rachel and Brendan is palpable. Like they are
Oh,
perfect
100%.
together.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say even I was watching it and I was thinking, I was like, yes, the chemistry between them two is fantastic. Also, the chemistry between Rachel and Brendan, and then I don't know the man's name that plays Jonathan, her brother,
Right.
but those three are like a perfect like leading characters because Jonathan's like the super silly, stupid idiot brother that you love. He means well, but can't do a damn thing right.
Yeah.
Then you have our damsel in distress, who's a brilliant librarian that can answer any riddle and solve any problem. Then you have our hunky buff, a little bit dumb, but we still love him warrior.
Yeah.
And they're three of them. I could tell, like, I mean, it looked like they were having a great time making this movie. Like they just the three of those characters really connected super well together, I thought.
They are absolutely perfect together. They carry the film very well, and I just think we're very lucky that they were all cast in these roles.
Right place, right time.
Yeah. So they wanted to film this movie in Egypt, but there were unstable political, like kind of climate limitations. So they actually shot in Morocco. I believe it was around Marrakesh.
Mhm.
The the cast and crew had to have kidnapping insurance, which they were not informed of until after production had wrapped.
What does that even mean? I want to know what kidnapping insurance is. What does that mean? Like, oh, if you get kidnapped, like your family gets money? Like, how
I
does
think it
that work?
must like life insurance. I would assume. The setting was treacherous. A number of the crew were air evac'd and hospitalized because they were bitten and stung by local wildlife. And doctors had to create this special concoction that they had to drink every 2 or 3 hours to remain properly hydrated because it was so hot filming there.
Well, first of all, can we get the ingredients for this? How do I get some?
Yeah, yeah,
Look, this looks great for my hangover days, okay?
right, right,
But
right.
well, it's funny. I can see that because watching the movie, like when they're out in the sand, I'm like, oh, I just know that was probably a bitch to shoot because like, it looks hot from just
Mhm.
looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and let's let that lead us into this film's mix of practical and CGI. Because if this film were made today, the entire thing would have been done in front of a green screen. Like
Yeah.
there would be no practical sets. And while this film takes really big swings at early CGI, some of it works, some of it doesn't.
Mhm.
I'm never distracted by like that looks terrible. Unlike the Scorpion King and the Mummy Returns. Like I think it's consistently works, but we get these great battle sequences where like there are actual actors on actual horses with actual gunfire and real fire happen. Like fake CGI
I think
fire
people like
has
I
never
know.
say well, like fake CGI fire never looks good. It
No.
never looks convincing. And
No.
so it's really refreshing to see this movie be able to use CGI to enhance ancient Egypt and make that look really beautiful and cool. You can tell it's CGI, but and then
Yeah.
also have these cool battle sequences that are practical and choreographed and it's refreshing to be like, oh, there was a time when this was a successful combination.
100%. And I thought it's funny you use the men on horses example because I had that same thought. I was like, wait, this is like an actual, there's at least like 50 men in this scene on horses. Like,
Yeah.
this is awesome. And yeah, the practical effects, and this is sound really weird, and I don't know if this is going to make sense or if anyone's going to feel the same way I do, but I love when I can tell that this, like, I love when I can tell that a movie has a set. Like, I'm like, that's fake. That's just
Yes.
like, this is like a lot. And like, there's also that scene where I know we're going to get into a play-by-play of the movie, but when the the locals in the trance are chanting Imhotep, and then our heroes are running away in the car and they're skirting down this alley. I'm like, oh, I can tell the artistry that went into building this is obviously a Hollywood set, and you get that with so many of these older movies. And I love that. Like I love, and especially when they're in the tomb and all that stuff. I'm like, oh my god, I can tell this is a soundstage, and it makes me so happy. And so much of it now, not to like shit on Marvel movies, but I'm gonna shit on them for a second. Where a
Yeah.
lot of it is so CGI, it's all in front of a green screen. There's nothing tangible where I can. A lot of it is not tangible where I can say any sort of work went into it other than a computer. Not to say that people that work on CGI don't do work, but for the context of this conversation, you know what I mean. Like, there's not
Yes.
a lot of physical things that I can tap to and look at and be like, oh my god, look at that. That's Hollywood right there. And that's what I miss. I miss them working hard to give us the illusion that way.
Yeah. It's so funny. I made a note about that specific sequence because of how well choreographed the stunts are. Every scene in this movie is a stunt set piece, but there's a moment where a guy gets thrown from the car and he like hits a signpost, and that's an actor
Yeah.
who did that. Like now, it would not have been
Yeah.
an actor who did that. It would,
No.
it just looks so good, and yes, very intricately choreographed and planned, and um, yeah, I couldn't agree more at all. And just to bring back the Company of Wolves I mentioned, that entire enchanted forest that I mentioned is very clearly a soundstage in the most
Yes.
beautiful way. Like there's
I
glitter
love
on the
that.
trees, and it's just like
Yes.
it's. I get what you're saying. I love when I can tell that it's a set.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
I miss it. I miss it so much.
So score was by Jerry Goldsmith. He has 254 credits on IMDb. He
Wow.
won an Oscar for the song Ave Satini for The Omen. It's like the only horror film
Oh,
that's ever won Best Song. He scored
wow.
Congo and Legend before. I think he took over, or no, Tangerine Dream took over the score after. So he did like the director's cut, and then I believe Tangerine Dream came in and redid it when it tested poorly. Basic Instinct. Like this man's career is insane. And then
Wow.
cinematography by Adrian Biddle, who did Aliens and Thelma and Louise. So very
Wow. Okay.
versatile career.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Um, as soon as the film came out, the very next day, Universal called Summers and said, "We need another one." So they got started immediately. And then, of course, the ride at Universal, which has been incredibly popular. It still is. It's a great ride. Have you been on it?
Yes, have you been on it?
I have, yes.
I love, here's the thing is I love that ride. My complaint, it's like it's the best 10 seconds of your life because it's
So
the
short.
shortest ride. You'll wait 2 hours in line for a 10-second ride. So I let
Yeah.
everyone know that.
Yeah.
But it is, I'm not gonna lie, like that, it is kind of worth it for just the way that it goes from like 0 to 100 miles per hour so damn fast.
And
And
the fake out where
what's
you
that?
think you think it's over. There's a fake
Yeah.
out where you're pulling into the station and you're like, okay, it's over, and then a mummy attacks the fucking like ride operator and it all starts over again.
So I just never forget the first time I went on it, I think I was in like like no, I think it was yeah, it was like middle school or something. I was on it. I'm not from LA, but I took a trip to LA and we were at Universal Studios. And I remember I was like turned talking to my friend that was sitting next to me when it and then it takes off and my face like splayed pan out of the side of the seat. I couldn't turn my head because we were going so fast. And then my friend pissed herself. She was like, I can't get out of the seat because I peed. And I was like,
No.
are you serious? And she was like, yeah, I can't get up right now. And I was like, what are we gonna do? Because we had no idea that's what the ride was. I knew it was like a roller coaster of sorts, but I had no idea that it started off that fast. Like
Yeah.
we were very severely underprepared for that ride.
No, it's great. All right. Well, hey, what do you say we get into the plot of this movie?
Let's do it.
All right. So we start with the classic Universal Pictures logo, and as the Earth turns, it becomes like the burning Egyptian sun over the Great Pyramids. It's a really cool transition. The Sphinx is shown under construction, and the CGI, maybe modern day video game level, but it's beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
The colors are gorgeous. The sunset's
Yeah.
beautiful. A narrator informs us that Thebes, the city of the living, is the crown jewel of Pharaoh Seti the First, and Imhotep, played by Arnold Vosloo, who is hunky and handsome as fuck, perfectly cast. He's so good.
Yeah.
He is the pharaoh's high priest, and he's the keeper of the dead. And he looks over the splendid city, and he's approached by Anaxunamun, played by Patricia Velasquez, who is
And
gorgeous.
enter bisexual awakening number one. Yeah,
Yes,
or
1000%.
two. We're two in. We have Imhotep and now we have an Moon.
She is the pharaoh's mistress. No other man is allowed to touch her. She is painted gold with intricate designs in black. It took 4 hours to paint this woman. Aside from like a few pieces of jewelry, she's entirely nude.
Yeah, she looks amazing.
Yes.
And if I was her and I was immortalized in this movie in this scene forever, I would like die the happiest woman on this planet. I'd be like, yeah, that's me, bitch. Look how good I look. Like,
1000%. I'm gonna go ahead and say it and get it out there. This movie does some brown face and it casts ethnicities that are not true to what they're portraying. In 2024, we know better than to do any of that, and it needs to be acknowledged.
yeah, 100%.
So Imhotep and Anaxunamun kiss, and Imhotep actually smears some of that body paint on her shoulder. The pharaoh enters, played by Aaron Ipale, and he notices the smudged body paint. And Imhotep withdraws the pharaoh's sword from his own sheath, and Anaxunamun stabs him in the back. And she and Imhotep slay the pharaoh through like a veiled curtain. It's a really cool
Yeah.
shot.
They do that a couple times. They do that when they kill the pharaoh. They do that when well, you're about to say it, when she stabs herself. And then they do
Mm-hmm.
that at the end when she's reincarnated. They do this really cool, like shadowy kind of stabbing scenes, I think like 3 times throughout the movie, and I love it.
Yeah,
It's very cinematic.
even like the hunky blonde American guy, when his life force gets sucked out of him, it's through a
Oh
shadow
yeah.
on the wall, right? It's really cool. This movie specifically did not want to be overly gory. They actually had like levels of how much, like how gory could the mummy look. They didn't want him to be over the top. It's a PG-13. They wanted it to remain approachable to audiences, and I think it's a successful balance.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's really, other than like kind of gross mummy stuff, there's not really any blood in this movie at all.
No, no.
Yeah.
So Anaxunamun sends Imhotep away. She's being seized by the guards. She says that only he can resurrect her body. And he tells her that she will live again. The guards enter and discover the pharaoh's body. Anaxunamun tells them that her body is no longer his temple. Fuck yeah. The first of a number of feminist forward moments in this movie. It's still not perfect. It's
Yes.
still not perfect, but it's a lot more progressive in some ways than one might
Right.
expect.
100%. She's like, so I'm just gonna kill myself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so she plunges a dagger into her torso, killing herself
Yeah.
as Emotep watches this happen. This movie had a lot more, revisiting it now after I think the last time I watched it was probably quarantine. I realized there are a lot more callbacks and similarities to the original Boris Karloff, The Mummy, than I had initially remembered. And more agency is actually given to the female characters than in that film.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
Um,
actually, to be fair, I've never seen the original Mummy. I've only seen this one. And I pretend the 2017 one doesn't exist.
I haven't seen the 2017 one. The original Mummy is, I love it. It is, I mean, I'm wearing the Universal Monsters on my t-shirt right now.
Yes. Yeah,
It
I love
is
that.
my least favorite of them. He's
Okay.
only a mummy for maybe 2 minutes total.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's an hour and 15 minutes. It's a super quick watch, totally worth it for the history. And Karloff is
Yeah.
amazing in everything, you know.
Of
And
course.
very, quite a different story, but also enough similarities
Yeah.
that
Totally.
this movie still feels tied to it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So Imhotep and his priests steal her body and they take it to Hamunaptra, the city of the dead. It's the ancient burial site for sons of the pharaohs, the resting place for the wealth of Egypt. And Anaxunamun's soul has been sent to the underworld. Her vital organs are removed and placed in 5 sacred canopic jars. Imhotep uses the Black Book of the Dead to summon Anaxunamun's soul, and it's shown to be a black mist rising from a pool of water, which inhabits her body.
It always looks like tar to me.
Yeah. All right. It's like
I'm
it's like
I'm
solid but
confused.
misty.
Right, because I'm like, it bubbles. It's like coming from that pool of water that comes up later in the movie too, and it's like bubbling. And I'm like, I still don't know if it's supposed. To me, it looks like a bubbling tar pit, which I think is cool and gross. But I can't tell if it's supposed to be that or just like mist. Like I don't really know what they were trying to get at with that.
I maybe they didn't either.
I think it is actually no. Now that I say that, I think it is tar because I'm like jumping the gun a lot here. But he falls into it later, and I think in the Mummy 2, don't they bring him back? I haven't seen the Mummy 2 in a hot second, but I think he comes back
Out of
in
it.
he comes like they bring a tar, like he's like frozen in tar. So I think I now that
Okay.
I'm saying it out loud, I think it might be.
All right. That checks out.
Also, I want to know with this movie, like I don't know any of like I don't know how historically accurate any of this is. Like, do you know? Is Hamanacha and all these things like real places and things that happened?
The only thing that I know is that Imhotep was a real historical figure. He was not vilified. I believe the name Imhotep actually means bringer of peace. I did a little bit of reading
Yeah.
on this, but he was not a villain. He was actually just kind of like a celebrated
Right.
part of the, I'm not going to say royal court, but the
Yeah, yeah.
pharaoh's
I read that too. I
crew.
think that they kind of took a lot of like random historical people and put their names in this. Like I
Right.
think Anub-Moon and I think Seti is are all real people that don't necessarily have anything to do with one another at the same
Right.
time. Same with Imhotep. And I even heard that Rachel's character Evie is based off of the daughter of the. See if I can get this right. The character is based off the daughter of the financier, let's just say, who financed the excavation of King Tut's tomb, if that
Interesting.
makes sense. And I think she like this was a real like Evelyn was a real woman that went with them to like watch the discovery of King Tut. And so Evelyn's character in the movie is loosely based on her. And that's why like later in the movie she says, oh, my dad was a famous explorer. Because like this
Yeah.
character, I think originally in one of the original forms of the script, they go into her backstory more and they were going to pull from some of that real life stuff. But they end up cutting a lot of it out. So it's just kind of like lore now.
That's cool. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so she was based that was so convoluted what I said, but basically the guy that financed the excavation of King Tut, it was her character is based off his daughter,
That's cool.
is what I
That's
read.
really cool. If
Yeah.
I remember correctly, in the original Mummy, Evelyn and Anaksu Namun are more like one character. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of separated. Like I believe the Evelyn-esque, I don't even think her name is Evelyn in that movie, is the reincarnation of Anaksu Namun, like right outright. But
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
all right, so the Pharaoh's bodyguards bust in and they stop Imhotep right before he can complete the ritual. And Namun's soul departs the body and returns to the pool of tar. The priests are condemned to be mummified alive. We see it happening. Their tongues are removed, their organs are getting ripped out. And Imhotep is forced to endure the Hamdai, the worst of all curses. His tongue is removed, he's wrapped like a mummy, and he's placed in a sarcophagus with scarab beetles, which are carnivorous, black, but like shiny iridescent beetles. They're terrifying. And he is sealed and buried and forced to endure as the undead for all of eternity. Should he arise, he'll be a walking disease, a plague on all mankind, an unholy flesh eater with the strength of ages, power over the sands, and the glory of invincibility. Why would anyone bestow an enemy with powers like this? Who came up with this fucking curse and was like,
Right.
let's give, immortality to the guy that we're punishing? It's
Right. They couldn't have done it to like a Gandhi character. I'm like,
right,
really? Like, you couldn't have given it to like a peace warrior, like
right,
someone that we would have liked.
yeah,
No. Oh my, and it's funny because those Beatles, I think if you like that's I feel like they became like one of the maybe the most iconic part of this movie.
yeah,
I wonder if they knew that going into it. Like these Beatles are so synonymous. Like if you, especially someone that's kind of casually watched it, maybe 20 years ago when it first came out, the thing you're gonna remember is those Beatles like crawl under your skin and eat you. Like
totally.
that just goes right into human nature's like bugs crawling under your skin.
Yeah.
And as a kid, that's always what grossed me out the most too.
And they're well utilized because they're not overused, but they're just kind of around. And every time
Yeah.
you hear them scurrying, you're like, oh shit, here they come.
Yeah.
So Imhotep is buried at the feet of a statue of Anubis, the Egyptian god of death, and we get our title card, the mummy, which blows away like sands in the desert wind. And that sandy wind continues and it erodes the statue of Anubis, and we are brought into Hamunaptra in the year 1923, where men and armies have warred over the land for 3,000 years. They don't know that evil lies beneath it. So now, two opposing armies battle while the Magi, or the descendants of Pharaoh's sacred bodyguards, look on. So they keep watch over Hamunaptra, and they are led by Ardith Bey, played by the handsome and gorgeous Oded Fair, who, like, while I knew and recognized Brendan Fraser as a very handsome, hunky, incredible man, I think Oded Fair probably caught my attention more when I was watching this movie as a kid.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. He's so
Uh,
handsome. Also, he's also in I
Deuce
love
Bigelow.
Resident Evil. What's he say?
Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo.
Oh, I haven't okay. He's also in I think of him from Resident Evil 2. And
Oh,
I loved the first couple Resident Evil movies, and I think his name is Carlos in that movie, and his hair is short in that though, but
okay.
he is so attractive.
Oh,
He's so handsome.
such a babe. Yeah, in Deuce Bigelow, he's the gigolo that inspires Deuce to become a gigolo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
I
that's a
haven't
terrible
heard
movie, and I'm sure it's aged very poorly, but he's
I
hot in
have
it.
to, I'm gonna have to go back and just YouTube that scene because I do know that movie because I do know there's that really, I mean, again, not culturally sensitive, but there is that really funny Amy Poehler bit where she has Tourette's and he takes her out on the date.
Oh my god, yeah, I forgot. No,
Yeah,
I
which
forgot
I
that was
know.
her.
Yes, and it's just funny because it's Amy Poehler, so she could read a phone book and I'm gonna laugh.
Yeah,
But like that scene is so great just because Amy Poehler. I think yeah, it's like pre-fame Amy Poehler just going crazy at a baseball game because she has Tourette's, and it's
oh my
so
god.
yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, so he has been narrating this. It was actually originally supposed to be Emotep narrating, but Summers realized that Emotep wouldn't be able to speak English, so he
I
gave
like
it.
that now we're getting into the logic. We're like, okay, Mummy's coming back to life. We draw the line that he can't speak English.
Right, right,
Okay.
right. I do like that it was given to Ardith Bay instead. It gives him a little more oomph and
Me
agency
too.
over
No,
the story.
I think that he works so much better as a narrator because
Yeah,
he is quite literally the overseer of the grave and to
yeah.
make sure that the world stays safe.
And a
So it
little
makes
bit chaotic neutral. Like he's not rooting for our heroes and he's not rooting for the
mm,
mummy. He's rooting for the survival of
of
the
mankind.
world.
Yeah, yeah, he really is. Like, all these, as much as we love these characters, like this is honestly this whole thing is kind of Evelyn's fault. So as much as
Well,
we love her, she is, they make mistakes along the way, and he's just kind of like, oh Jesus, all you people are so stupid, and I now have to save the world.
I mean, this movie showcases Western characters going to excavate and raid tombs, and it's kind of like how problematic museums can be in
Yeah.
taking artifacts from other cultures, and
Yeah.
it's this is a story about Egypt from white people's perspectives, which
Yeah.
would
Mhm.
be a very interesting movie to just see a movie about Egyptians. I don't know. Maybe we should make that and not make it the gods of Egypt where they're all played by white people.
Right? Yeah.
So our magi are they wear black robes, they have tattoos on each side of their face. They were supposed to be covered entirely by tattoos, but Summers felt that Oded Fair was way too handsome for that, so they
Oh,
scaled back
thank
on the
God.
tattoo. I know. Yeah.
God. Thank God someone said that and said, "You're too hot. We can't cover you up."
Right. Yeah. No, we meet Rick O'Connell, played by Brendan Fraser, and his squire, Benny, played by
Where for him, his fop, his like
his,
little surf.
his
Yeah.
pop. He's played by Kenny O'Connor. He's so good in this role. I recently watched Lord of Illusions, the Clive Barker movie, and he's in that, and
Oh.
he's excellent. He's so good.
He plays his character really well because he is wormy. Like he
Yeah.
is so shady, sketchy, shifty. He plays his kind of character really well. Like
Yeah.
a true rat.
Rick is, for some reason, and I don't know if they ever explain it, fighting with the French over this
I
like
was wondering, I was like, what? I mean, I was kind of confused about this battle happening at the beginning. I'm like, why is he here? What's going on? Maybe I'm asking too many questions.
nope,
Let's
literally
see what's
doesn't
going with it.
say because and here's the thing too, he keeps calling the opposing team the Americans when he's obviously an American also, unless it's
Yeah.
like Kevin Costner and Robin Hood where he couldn't do an English accent so they just let him use his American accent. Like is that
It's funny because, well, I want to know, I don't know, maybe you know this. Is Steven the director, is he British or is he American?
oh, I couldn't tell you.
Because there's a lot of, I mean, it could go either way, but there's a lot of commentary about how there is a lot of commentary about Americans' behavior in this movie, which
Obnoxious and yeah.
obnoxious, loud, stupid. You know, they're ones they're not thinking things through very thoroughly. And
No.
there's a couple jokes that both Jonathan and Evie, they're like, the Americans this, no offense, and Brendan Fraser's like, none taken. Like he seems to be over the American thing too.
Yeah.
So I think it also is a kind of a commentary on, like you said earlier, about how we're coming in here and excavating and stealing the culture of Egypt. And I think that that was on purpose to make the Americans look stupid. You know,
Sure.
like
Well, and
they're the ones that know what's going
our
on.
British heroes are doing it for the good of academia, whereas the Americans are in it for the money.
Right, right. So you can argue about the good of academia too, but yeah, exactly. The Americans are in it for greed and
Yeah.
fame and you know, all that stuff.
Well, so the leader of this French army flees on horseback, and Benny tells Rick that he's just been promoted. So I guess Rick was second in charge. He's an American second in charge of a French army. I don't fucking know.
Sure.
And so he is holding fire, holding fire. Benny runs away as a coward. And suddenly the battle ensues, and the French are overtaken. It's a great scene of practical horses with practical people on them.
Okay.
Benny hides inside the temple, and he closes the door behind him, locking Rick out in the battle. He is cornered, but before being shot, the enemy turns around and retreats in fear. They hear kind of ghostly noises. Rick stands under the statue of Anubis, and he hears the words, "You will die," as sands shoot up from the ground, chasing him away to reveal a face and an open mouth in the sands below the statue. Really cool, just iconic movie poster moment. You know,
Yeah.
we start to see that Imhotep has control over the sands. Ardith Bay remarks that the creature remains undiscovered, and they just let Rick walk away. The desert will kill him.
Right.
We cut to 3 years later in Cairo, and we are at the Museum of Antiquities, where librarian Evelyn, played by Rachel Weisz, sorts through historical volumes and accidentally knocks over rows and rows of bookshelves. She's like teetering on the ladder. I think it's a really great introduction to her, where she's just so like, she has this kindness to her throughout this
Yes.
entire and enthusiasm, and she's just like a delight. Like I would love to hang out with
So damn
Evelyn.
charming. She's so, first of all, we kind of talked about how it's like an old Hollywood movie, and she a lot of that is because of her. She has these old
Yes.
Hollywood looks. She's so beautiful
The
by any.
eyebrows. The eyebrows give you 1920s.
Yes, and her acting, I had to have been on purpose for her because I think that she intentionally, like, it's wonderful, but she does kind of have this old Hollywood kind of like acting style.
Yes.
And she's so sweet and so charming and so lovable. And like, yes, she's so brilliant, but yes, of course, she's a little bit klutzy, you know, she has to
Yeah.
be a little klutzy, you know. But what's so funny, and I had never noticed it before in the movie, but I noticed it this time watching, was when it zooms as the big, when it does the big zoom out of her balancing on the ladder, you know, in between the two bookshelves. I would bet my entire life it's a man. It's a stunt double.
Oh, sure.
It's a stunt double for sure. It's a man. And I can't tell if it's always been that obvious or just now my TV is too HD where I was like, Oh, I was like, that is some male cheekbones in a wig, and that is like big arms holding himself up on this ladder.
And
And
what
it
happened
was,
to her waist?
yeah, I was like, wait a minute. And I'd never noticed that before. And I was like, oh, this is very clearly a male stunt double in these wide shot takes, which I thought was so funny.
The shot where the shelves fall like dominoes in a circle around the library was done in one single take. Had there been any mishap and it didn't work, they would have completely had to reset. It would have taken an entire day. So, first off, that would probably be a CGI moment today.
Oh, 100%.
Second, Rachel as an actor, that pressure of being like, girl, we have one take to do this. I need you to hit every mark perfectly
Yes.
in the middle of this destruction, and she does it and she nails it. But yeah, one take, and then they had to move on.
That is so stressful.
Yeah. So her employer, Dr. Terrence Bay, played by Eric Avari, discovers this mess and scolds her. And we learn that Evelyn reads and writes ancient Egyptian, and she can decipher hieroglyphics later. And so he employs her because he knew her parents,
Right.
her father, the great explorer. Later, she is startled by her brother, Jonathan Carnahan, played by John Hannah, who is a bit of a louse. And we learn that the Bembridge scholars have rejected her application again, claiming that she doesn't have enough field experience, which we all know she's about to get. Jonathan shows her an artifact he's found in Thebes, and it's one of the keys that was used to lock Imhotep's tomb when he was mummified. Now they don't know that it's a key yet. We recognize it as a key. It reminds me of the puzzle box in Hellraiser, like what is the lament configuration in like the later sequels, how it kind of changed shape a little bit. You know, like the
Yeah.
most recent one, it was different shapes. I feel like it
Yeah.
could live in that universe.
Totally. And I was to say it looks like the Damon Rightus from the Scooby-Doo live action movie.
Oh no, you're so right.
Today I was like, oh my God, the Damon Rightus. And I was
That's
like, I just heard Mr. Bean saying that.
that's I'm dying to do an episode on Scooby Doo and on Zombie Island.
Oh my God, I saw that on that. I love that movie.
All right, so inside they put kind of she messes with it and it pops open and there's a map inside that leads to Hamunaptra. I'm just going to put it out there. The Egyptians have made a key that opens Imhotep's tomb, both books, and provides a map to where they need to go, and it's all one thing. Like, what are you
It's
thinking?
like begging for this guy to be awoken, right?
Yes,
They're like,
yeah.
we're waiting for some dumb white people to come along and wake this guy up.
Right. So it also leads to the pharaoh's treasure. Obviously, Evelyn concedes that there are rumors of a curse of mummy monsters and that the city may actually exist, but it's booby trapped and very treacherous. Dr. Bay, as they're showing it to him, accidentally burns the corner of the map where the city can be found, but he discourages their venture. He says it's pointless, but they decide to pursue it anyway. Evelyn and Jonathan seek the man that Jonathan stole this artifact from, who happens to be Rick, who is now jailed. His hair is long and scraggly. He is cocky and brutish.
Back to his George of the Jungle here.
He looks like George in the Jungle. She asks him about the puzzle box. He punches Jonathan through the bars. And when Evie asks how to get to Hamunaptra, he kisses her through the bars and tells her if she gets him out of jail as he's dragged away, he'll tell her where it is. And he is to be hanged. So they're watching the hanging. And Evie is sitting next to the jailer, played by Omid Jalili, and she's kind of trying to haggle with him, like, I'll pay you, man. Like, please, like, don't kill this guy. I really need him. When they did this stunt, he actually went out and had to be resuscitated. Like, he could have died this day. I don't know how it went wrong. I don't know why it wasn't a stunt person, but he looks, when the noose is around his neck, like, it looks like he's absolutely hanging.
That's first of all, that's crazy. And also, I want to know how, because they do a wide shot of the body falling from the trap door
Mm-hmm.
and his neck not snapping. I want to know, I mean, this is above my pay grade, I suppose, but how do you do that stunt without actually snapping someone's neck? Like, I'm curious how they got that shot because it looks like a real person on a real rope that had to launch down, 10 feet or so.
So I only know this because in theater, when productions do Jesus Christ Superstar, when Judas hangs himself, the
Mhm.
way that it's often done on stage is that he has a harness around his waist that is shorter
Oh,
than the noose around the neck. And so the harness is what catches. The noose is not quite as tight as the harness. And
yes.
so it just looks, and perhaps the noose has some elasticity to it to make it
Okay.
look more tight.
Interesting. It's probably, yeah, I figured I'm like, maybe there's a pull like on his back that we're not seeing or something. It's like a
Yeah.
hydraulic or something. I don't know. It's like maybe that makes sense. Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So she reveals to the jailer that Rick knows where Hamunaptra is, and she haggles him down to 25% of the findings. He screws himself over. She gets him down to 30%. He says 25, and she says, "Ha, yes!" And
Yeah. He is, by the
after,
way, another great comedic side character
yeah,
is Jailer. I love, like, he cracks me up in this movie, the things that he says. He's such a little
yes.
character.
I do have problems with the way that he is portrayed as kind of like the fat, smelly brown man, and
That
who
is true. Yeah,
is the
they
butt
do
of every
really
joke.
right.
It's very obvious and very like done, but
Yeah.
he portrays his role quite well. He is funny throughout, and it looks like he is at least enjoying the film.
Let's hope. Yeah, maybe.
Let's
He's gonna
hope.
watch. He's gonna DM me and be like, "What the fuck did you say?"
Right,
Yeah.
right. Now, as they
Yeah.
prepare for departure, Rick shows up and he's clean shaven and he's super handsome. He's got a nice swoopy haircut and he's well dressed. This catches Evie's attention. They sail up the Nile and discover that Jonathan has blabbed about their voyage to Hamunaptra to some scoundrels like the Americans aboard the ship as they're playing poker, because that's what Americans do.
Mhm.
And they place bets on who's going to find it first. It's a $500 bet. I was listening to a podcast that did the math. That's about $8,500 with inflation now. So that's a big bet. Rick startles Evelyn as she's reading a book. He whips out and tosses his weaponry onto the table in a gross display of phallic machismo. He explains that there's something under the sand out there. Evelyn tells him she believes, aside from the treasure, there's also buried the Book of Amun-Ra, which contains the secret incantations of the Old Kingdom.
I would just like to say it's so funny because I'm like, when it comes to this character, I'm like, all my years of progressiveness have gone out the door. And if he threw down weapons in front of me, I'd be like, oh yes. I'm like, yes, save me. I'd be suddenly like the most like helpless. I'm
Yeah,
like, yes. I was like, you can do whatever you want. I don't need consent. Like
yeah.
when he was at the jail, I'm like, I'm gonna go on record now. I am a taken man, but I'm letting Brendan Fraser know that he has consent to kiss me if he just get a blanket statement that.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'll let him know that you said
Yeah,
that.
next time we talk to him. Yeah.
Right. So this book of Amun-Ra is what got her into Egyptology in the first place. And she says, as Rick is kind of walking away, "Why did you kiss me?" And she's a little flirty about it. She's a little like, "So,
She's
daddy,
like,
why'd you kiss me?" And he
yeah.
just tells her, "Well, I was about to die, so it seemed like a good idea at the time." And she takes offense and walks away. Benny can be found lurking in the shadows. Rick discovers he is the one leading the American adversaries to Hamunaptra. And after a lighthearted back and forth, Rick throws Benny overboard, but he notices wet footprints on the deck. As Evelyn paces her room, she's flustered by Rick's brashness. A Magi holds a blade to her neck, comes out of nowhere, and demands the map and key. Rick busts in shooting. He accidentally shoots a an oil lantern, an oil lamp, which catches the ship on fire. The map burns, but Rick insists he's the map. Just come with me if you want to live. Jonathan grabs the key just in time, and the passengers abandon the burning ship amidst panic and gunfire. Rick, Evie, and Jonathan and the jailer all jump overboard. They are on one side of the Nile. The Americans and Americans and Benny are on the other side.
I just love it. He goes, looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river.
He's so good. He delivers what aren't great lines in such a way that they're
So like they're so cheesy, but like I
yeah,
love it. I eat it up every time. And like I love him and Rachel have that great moment when they're dipping out of the boat when her bedroom's on fire. And she's like, but the map. And he's like, I have the map up here. And she's like, oh, that's comforting. Like they have
yeah.
a funny, yeah.
The white nightgown that she wore in this scene actually got like super see-through when she got wet, and they had to go through with CGI and like paint it so that she didn't look naked on camera.
Wow. I wonder if that was, I mean, that seems to be like a basic rule of thumb. Like white clothing gets see-through when you're wet. So I
You would
wonder what
think.
the intention was there.
Well, I think white would be a purposeful choice, because in the next scene they are at a market and they get some camels, and Evie is made over in local Egyptian fashions, and she's wearing black, like a black robe and a
Yeah.
black veil, and so she's transformed. She's a little more dangerous now, a little more sexy.
God, this is adventure Evie.
Right. They travel through the desert in a scenic montage, watched afar from the Magi. Rick notices Rick notices this. He does notice them off in the distance. The next morning, they come upon Benny and the Americans, and they watch the sunrise over the desert, which reveals Hamunaptra in the distance, like a mirage. It's kind of a cool, like, this is a secret city thing, you know? The two groups race toward it. Rick and Evie arrive first. It's romantic. I love Rick kind of throws Benny off of his camel and he gets trampled. The Americans comment that the other group may know something that they don't. And Dr. Alan Chamberlain, played by Jonathan Hyde, who was in Titanic and
Yes.
Jumanji, and
Yeah.
he remarks that they are led by a woman. What does a woman know? And we punchline cut to Evelyn just spouting all of this fabulous knowledge about Egypt.
All the statues. Yeah. She's like, this is that. And this is that. A great cut there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She is using ancient mirrors to reflect sunlight, and we'll see why in a moment. They go underground, and she aligns the mirrors perfectly, and it lights up the space. And suddenly there's light underground. They're in the space where the mummies were made earlier. Led by torches, they hear strange sounds, which we know to be scarabs, and they avoid dusty cobwebs, and then they come upon the Americans. They argue about who found it first, but Evie realizes they should probably look elsewhere. She notices kind of like a crack in the floor. It informs her that maybe they should go dig from below. So the Americans, they depart. The Americans open up a booby trap. And God, the fucking mean doctor, I just said his name, Dr. Chamberlain, puts the local diggers in front and is like, actually, wait,
Yeah.
have them open this door.
Well, I think it's another knock at the Americans. I think it's another commentary on here comes the Americans utilizing the locals and then
Yeah.
killing them off, basically,
Yeah.
sacrificing them.
Because when they do open it, they are melted with pressurized salt acid that just spews all over them.
Course.
Now, as they search, Evie explains that the mummies were made by removing vital organs, and they would shove a red hot poker up the corpses' noses, scrambling the brains and then scooping them out.
That description alone, I know we don't see anything, but that is the most like terrifying thought of all time. Like even when we learned about ancient Egypt in, in grade school or whatever, like I was always fascinated. Like I can't look away because the thought of that, and this is like very dark. I know anyone would be scared of this, but like that's why anytime there's like a lobotomy in a movie, like I just rewatched American Horror Story season 2 and they like give that woman a lobotomy. And I'm like, that thought of like going up your nose and touching like it's worse than anything I've ever seen in Saw. I'm like, that is so disgusting.
Well, and I want to know who was the Egyptian who decided this was the practice of mummification. What was the process of like of just defiling corpses and figuring out this is the way to go from now on?
100%. And something that I caught this time around, which, or maybe I just haven't seen the movie in a second, but I definitely did not catch it as a kid, that I didn't realize that Anck-su-namun's internal organs were put in those vases with the animal heads on them, which is, I knew obviously they were treasure. I thought they were just treasure because it was expensive and they're artifacts, but that's why I later learned, I was like, oh, that's why Imhotep wants those, is because her internal organs were placed in those, which I did not pick up as a kid. And during this recent rewatch, I was like, oh, that was an extra layer I did not pick up on.
Well, the first 3 minutes of this movie is a huge exposition dump, and it's mentioned so briefly.
Yeah,
that you're taking everything in, and it's well shot and it's a well told sequence, but there's a lot going on in a very brief amount of time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So Jonathan accidentally triggers a trap, and a sarcophagus falls from the ceiling directly at the base of Anubis. Evie remarks that he must have been someone of great importance, or that he did something very naughty.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the jailer has gone off on his own. He's seeking the treasure by himself. He comes upon what appear to be, like he calls it, blue gold, and it's they're kind of stuck in the walls. It's in the shape of beetles. They're adorning the walls. He plucks one and pockets it, and another one seems to hatch, a scarab. And suddenly multiple beetles crawl underneath his skin as he starts screaming. And it's the first time that we get to see what we have imagined these scarabs do. The CGI is not great, but I remember the first time I saw it in a theater being like blown away at how cool and gross it was.
Yeah, I think, 100%. The CGI did not age super well in this instance, but I think the thought alone, the idea of this bug crawling into your skin and going up your body is bad enough on its own that you kind of forgive the CGI.
Yeah. Evie reads the sarcophagus and it says, "He who will not be named." And she realizes the puzzle holding the map is the key to open it. It fits into the little groove, but before she opens it, they are distracted by the jailer's screams. Jonathan grabs the key and the jailer runs past them headfirst into a wall, and that kills him. So Rick, Evie, and Jonathan sit up like in the desert, like above the city, around a fire, discussing whether or not curses are real. Evie is practical. She does not believe in them, but Rick believes in being prepared. The Magi attack the camp, and another gun and sword battle ensues. Ardith Bay suddenly is like, enough, no more bloodshed, and tells them that they must leave this place at once. Now, the two groups, so our heroes and the Americans, decide to combine forces and keep watch overnight over the camp while Rick is teaching a drunken Evie how to fight. And Evie tells Rick that Egypt is in her blood. I love the line, what is she's drunk? What is a place like this doing in a no, what is a place like me doing in a girl like this?
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Yeah. And he's
She's
like, yeah,
so
think
you
about
said
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
you said it. She's
yeah,
charming. Like she's
yeah.
just a delight. Um,
She's so lovable and just a I just love watching Rachel on my screen. I
yeah.
could do it all day.
In anything. So her
In
father
anything.
was a famous explorer. He loved Egypt so much that he married her mother, an Egyptian adventurer. She tells him that she may not be an adventurer or a gunslinger or a fighter, but she's proud of what she is. Rick says, what is that? And she just goes, I am a librarian.
Yes. I love that line. I love it because the whole time he's like, I get him, I don't get you. I get your parents, but I don't get you.
Yeah,
And she's like, you don't get me. I am a librarian. I'm like, it's perfect. It's
she's
so
so
good.
cute. Yeah, she goes in for a kiss, but then she just passes out on his lap drunk.
Yeah.
At sunrise, the American team uncovers a box covered in hieroglyphs, and Dr. Chamberlain reads, Death will come on swift wings to whosoever opens this chest. I would not open this chest. The diggers, the locals, run away in fear. We learn there is one who is dead who will regenerate using the organs and fluids of those who open it to come back to life and set a plague upon the world.
I like that they also just saw like they when they opened it, they got melted their faces off with acid salt or whatever, and now they're like, oh, another box? Let's just
Right.
dive in. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, what could be wrong here?
Well, they open it despite the warnings, and inside the box, they find a big, ornate black book, which we will learn is the Book of the Dead. And it looks like it needs to be opened by the same key that opened that sarcophagus. There are also ornate jars within. So these are the jars that Anaxunamun's organs were placed in.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Evie, Rick, and Jonathan open the sarcophagus they found and they discover a rotted mummy, but he's still, quote, juicy. He should be dust. He should be, he's 3,000 years old and he looks like he's still decomposing.
So can I ask you, I had this thought. How do you feel about the design of the mummy?
Hmm. Considering that they weren't going overly gory and considering that it is a CGI effect, I think for 1999 it really works. The
Yeah.
look of the mummy in the original is quite different, bordering perhaps problematic.
Mm.
I like it, and I like getting to see him slowly regenerate each time that he comes after one of the Americans who opened the box.
Yeah, I agree. I think it works. And I actually don't even think it's funny. I don't think that I know at this point he's not reanimated, so it is like a practical prop at this point. But um when I don't even think the CGI is too bad. I'm like, there's movies that come out now that have
Yeah.
worse CGI than when he becomes animated or when he becomes alive. I don't think the CGI is that bad. The one kind of note I have is I can't tell if it's just the lighting of the scene, but when they say he's still juicy, I kind of wish that he was juicier.
Yeah,
Like he
sure.
doesn't look super like I understand what they were saying, but I feel like maybe it would have been more effective if there was more like he had a little bit more meat on him or something. Like
Some
or
some some gooiness, some
some
fluids.
gooiness on him. Because they say that, and then the next scene, there is a scene where he's lit a little bit differently, and I can see it a little what they mean a little bit better. But I think when they say that line, I'm like, oh, I do wish he was a little bit goopier or
Yeah.
something gross.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Definitely. It is he looks super super dark dark brown in this sequence, and then when he is CGI later it looks like they lightened him up a little bit.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, you're very right about that.
So they find fingernail scratches on the inside indicating that he was buried alive, and he also scratched the phrase death is only the beginning on the lid of the sarcophagus. Evie deduces that the mummy was slowly eaten alive by scarab beetles. She finds like scarab carcasses or like shells or whatever, and she recognizes that he must have suffered the curse of the Hamdai and that his resurrection would bring with him the 10 plagues of Egypt. I think it's really cool that they incorporate the Egyptian plagues into this film.
Super cool.
It adds so
Super
much.
cool. Yeah, I agree.
Evelyn sneaks the book the Americans found and tells Rick that it isn't the book of Amun Ra that she's been looking for, but it's the book of the dead. And she uses her key to open it, deducing that no harm ever came from reading a book. And I'm just like,
Oh.
did you never see Evil Dead?
I was about to say, have you ever seen Evil Dead? Yeah.
uh, when she opens it, ghostly shrieks sound off, and Rick says, "That happens a lot around here." It's another
Yeah.
dumb line that just works because
Yeah,
it's Brendan.
of course.
She reads from the book, just like the Necronomicon. It
Yeah.
reanimates the juicy corpse of Imhotep, and a plague of locusts instantly swarms the encampment. The Americans descend into the catacombs, and one of the Americans, Burns, loses his glasses. All right, Kyle, this is a trope in it, especially like I think it's from Scooby Doo when Velma would lose her
Yeah.
glasses. When
My
someone
glasses. Like, you can see that my glasses.
my heart breaks every time, and I don't know why. It just affects me every time. It's this dumb thing about me. I feel really sorry for this person because hello, but you're fucked. You don't know where you're going anymore.
Like, yeah, it renders you, I mean, it renders you completely helpless in a
Yeah,
situation like this. So I think it is just like, I totally understand what you mean, where it is so sad. You're like, oh God, you're so, I don't, you know what, he's so weakened at this point because
yeah,
I'm like, his chances of survival now are so much smaller.
yeah,
This guy has a rough go at it, which we'll find out, but
yeah.
I totally know what you mean.
They get stepped on. He's totally screwed. As he stumbles in the dark, he is attacked from behind by the mummy.
Oh,
Rick, Evie, and Jonathan are chased by a swarm of scarab beetles. Evie falls through a trap door in the wall, separating her from the group, and she finds herself in a dark lair with Burns, whose eyes and tongue have been removed. The mummy appears now with Burns's eyes and tongue inside of his face,
mhm.
and he approaches Evie, and he briefly mistakes her for a Noxuna moon. I just realized if Burns had an astigmatism, but the mummy took his eyes, does the mummy need glasses?
Imagine those eyes. Like, oh, let me get some glasses. I think that's just something we're supposed to overlook.
Great, great. All right.
Also, like, I have to say, when I was watching this scene and the mummy is going towards Rachel or Evie, she goes, "Help me. Will you please help me?" And I'm like, it's already been revealed to you, bitch, that he has no eyes
Yeah,
and no tongue. Are you serious right now? Like, when she said that, I was like, what do you want him to do? He has no
right.
eyes, no mouth. He can't help you. And she keeps saying, like, please help me, Burns, or whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
girl, you got to rescue yourself right now because he's not going to be helpful right
No,
now.
no, not in the least. He's literally crawling around on his back in agony.
I was like, you are being really stupid right now. Please, please be so serious.
So Rick, Jonathan, and two Americans find Evie. The mummy screams at them, and then Rick just screams back, and it's such an unexpected reaction that it's so funny.
It's so dumb. I love it.
Well, he does it again later with the
Yes.
resurrected priests, and it doesn't work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then he runs.
Yeah. So he shoots Imhotep, and Imhotep is wounded because he's not fully regenerated yet. They run away, and they happen upon the Magi. Ardith Bay tells them that they have doomed them all, unleashing a creature not of this world who has slept for 3,000 years. So the Magi descend into the city to hunt the mummy. Our heroes get the fuck out of there.
Yeah. They're like,
We see Benny, and he runs into the mummy. I actually really like this sequence. He begins praying, holding up various religious icons around his neck, like
yeah.
a cross or a Buddha, and so, he starts praying in English and then Arabic and then Chinese and then Hebrew. And the mummy recognizes that as the language of the slaves. So he tells him, "I may have use for you,"
Right.
and he promises rewards.
That was something I did not like. That was something, again, this time watching it around. It's funny because this movie, I it's on TV literally all the time. Like,
Yeah,
it's literally on, and we have Sling, so sometimes if it's on, I'll just have it playing in the background.
right.
This is the first time in a while I've sat down, like, start to finish, and closely paid attention to a lot of things. And for some reason, I'd never picked up that Benny was pulling out the different like, he does a really funny, like, Buddhism bit, like he's
Yeah,
just pulling at the different religious icons around his neck. I never picked that up, that that's what he was doing watching that, especially as a kid. Like, I didn't understand that whole sequence.
right.
And I think it's so funny, and I think it is perfect for that character. Like I said, he is so despicable and so will turn on anybody, and he's
Yes.
truly such a rat that
Yeah.
he just has like six different, like, basically rosaries around his neck. It was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I was like, oh, that's so telling of who his character is. It's also funny and it also moved the plot forward. So I was like,
Yeah.
that was a great little moment.
I mean, he's playing all sides and yet only out for himself, you know? And
100%.
so
Yeah.
one of these religions has to be right. And
Right. 100%. It's such a good little bit.
so Emotep employs him to help him find the jars. Our group rides to Cairo, where Rick and Evie argue about leaving. Rick wants to leave. Evie's like, fuck that. We just set loose a wrath upon the world. We have to stop this. Now, meanwhile, Emotep and Benji approach Burns. So Emotep and Benji are in Cairo. Emotep has a really cool looking mask, like black mask over his face. He wears a black
Yes.
cloak to cover his mumminess.
I loved it. It was so creepy.
And he kind of sucks the life force out of what's left of Burns and begins to regenerate.
I noticed it's funny when he sucks basically the skin and everything off him and then he drops to the ground. He looks like the victims of Samara from The Ring.
Yeah, totally.
All like twisted and blue and contorted.
Yep. Now, at a bar slash brothel, Rick and Jonathan are hanging out, and the water turns to blood right before they take a drink. So this is another Egyptian plague, and Rick realizes he's here. And fire starts to rain from the sky over Cairo, destroying the city. Rick and Evie discover Emotep regenerating back to a more human form. And Rick shoots. The mummy overpowers him and thanks Evie for saving him from the dead. And he goes in for a kiss. But a cat approaches and scares him away into a cloud of sand. Evie takes them to her employer, Dr. Bay, who happens to be hanging out with Ardith Bay. So Bay is spelled two different ways. So it's with the doctor, it's B-E-Y. With Ardith, it's B-A-Y.
Now, who the hell, what scriptwriter really made that? Like, we couldn't have just changed one of their last names.
Only Rick. Well, it's to give the hint that perhaps there's a relationship between them because we find out that the doctor is also a Magi.
Oh, right. Okay, that's right.
But no one who is not looking at the screenplay or digging through the
Right.
credits is ever going to realize this.
Yeah.
We get a bit of kind of a okay, let's just kind of go over what we've learned so far moment.
Right. Yeah, it's like
killing,
let's just make sure the audience is totally full. I love these moments in
yeah,
movies. Oftentimes I need them. I'm the bitch
yeah,
that needs. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, I may have looked at my phone for a quick second. Where are we at? So I love,
right.
yeah.
Well, we learn Emotep is afraid of cats because they are sacred. And Evie has been chosen as Emotep's human sacrifice to resurrect Anaxuna Moon. And he must be stopped. And there's an eclipse happening outside, like plagues left and right.
Yeah.
Utter chaos. I wonder what the rest of the world is going through right now, not knowing any of
Right?
this.
Right. I know. I was thinking about that too. I'm like, wow, there's just like it like rains fire from the sky and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, the whole city is literally falling apart. And as everyone just like, oh, it's a Tuesday. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jonathan locks a protesting Evie in the bedroom for safety. He literally picks her up and throws her on the bed. And he and Jonathan head out to stop Emotep. Dr. Chamberlain is stalked by the mummy on the streets of Cairo as Rick knocks Benny around for information, just kind of throwing him around like, what the hell's going on? I love, love, love Benny's line where he says, it is better to be at the right hand of the devil than in his path.
Yeah,
It's
that's true.
just like,
Got to be this character's kind of motto for life.
yeah. Well, it's like, all right, if you got to justify your shitty behavior,
yeah,
I guess you
fine.
did a good job.
Yeah, you made that one little thing. Okay, fine. You made that one good point. All right.
Benny confesses Emotep wants the book to bring his dead girlfriend back to life. And in the streets, Emotep has sucked the life force out of Dr. Chamberlain and collected one of the jars. He looks more human. And it's you can tell it's a practical makeup on his forehead, and then kind of the lower jaw is CGI. He just looks pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, it looks really good. I like when he's like half. I don't know when it is. I don't know if it's this scene or if it's a little bit later when it's just like hit the right side of his face.
The next one.
It's the next one, yeah. And then he has like the bug crawl up it. I'm like, oh, that's a good shot.
Yeah. He unleashes a swarm of flies out of his mouth and causing chaos, and he just slowly walks through the running, scared people. The dumb, hunky, blonde himbo American is alone with a jar, but not for long. Emotep sucks his life force out. This is the one that's kind of, we see it happen in shadow on the wall.
Yeah.
Making him nearly whole again. Because now is when, yeah, just like you said, he's got kind of a hole in his cheek. A bug crawls up through the hole and he chews on it. It's so good.
Yes, it's awesome.
And he collects the jar. He turns himself into sand and pours himself through the keyhole of Evie's room. It's really cool. Kind of like how Dracula in the Francis Ford Coppola version becomes a green mist and seeps through the window.
Oh, good.
He kisses her in his sleep. His skin around his mouth starts to like crackle and fall apart when he does.
Yeah.
Rick busts in and he says, "Hey, get your ugly face off of her." And then he holds up a cat in his face to scare him away, which it does.
Dude, if that was me, that cat is gonna come everywhere with me. Like the
Oh,
fact that you can put the cat down, I'm like, they could have actually saved the world a lot quicker had they just brought a cat with them on this journey.
bring two. Why not?
Bring three, a cat for everyone.
My cat's looking at me right now. He's like, "Don't do that to me."
Yeah.
The Cairo locals begin to approach the fort under hypnosis. They are covered in boils and sores. This is the final plague of Egypt. They have become Imhotep's slaves, and they're after the heroes. Evie reads hieroglyphs revealing that the golden book is at Hamunaptra inside the statue of Horus. It's another dumb line where he's like, "Hurry up." And she goes, "Patience is a virtue." And he looks at the hordes of people and he's like, "Not right now, it isn't."
I say that it's so funny because you know how like just growing up you like kind of grab little one-liners
Yep.
that like and I say that line all the time and like no one ever picks up. I mean obviously that's a common saying, but I in my brain I'm saying it the same kind of musical way that she says it.
Yep.
And I was watching it when I watched it I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that that's where I got this from" because I say that all the time to people.
I'm literally the exact same way because this is where I learned what the word virtue means and that patience is a
Yeah,
virtue is a phrase. I'd never heard it before this week.
right.
So same with me. It like stuck with me for some reason.
Yeah, and you have to I always have to do it in the sing-songy way. I'm like,
Yep.
patience is a virtue.
So the group flees Cairo in a car. This is that sequence we were talking about earlier. They're running over Imhotep's slaves. They're punching them off the vehicle. It's really impressive. Brendan Fraser is great at throwing fists. Like he
Yeah,
just I don't know if he's
big dude.
taken boxing training or he just looks good fighting, you
Yeah, he
know?
does. He does. He fits this character very well. Like he
Yeah.
kind of slipped into his like a second skin here. Like he just this whole scene is one of my favorites in the movies. It's just so this is a great sequence that they did. Like I love this scene. And they used to have this car on display at Universal Studios, and I don't know if they
Cool.
still do anymore. But there used to be part of the tram tour where they had like all these famous cars lined up,
Yep.
and I remember this is one of the cars they had. I remember like when I first went as a kid, I was like, I like took a bunch of pictures of it. I was like, oh my God, that's the car from the Mummy.
That's cool. You know, this is a sequence that we don't need, but I'm glad that it's there. It's just
Yeah,
so much great diverse action in this
I
movie.
was gonna say that was one of my comments too. I was like, there is like they don't rely too much on it's like the perfect amount of monster action. I'm like, you
Yeah.
get plenty of monster, you get plenty of mummies, and then now he's a human, and then just when you're like, oh, I kind of miss mummy action, and the mummies pop out of the wall, and then you get the car chase. Like they do a really good job at keeping the audience entertained the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So Emotep drains the life force from our final American and regenerates, takes the jar from him. And our heroes are cornered. Emotep takes Evie with him, promising to spare her friends if she comes willingly. And she's like, I gotta do this, guys. I'm gonna go with him. And she turns to Rick and she says, "You must think of something quick because if he turns me into a mummy, you're the first one I'm coming after." He also takes the final jar from Jonathan. So now he has all the jars that he needs to resurrect his dead girlfriend. Rick and Jonathan escape in a manhole under the city as Professor Bay fends off the slaves, eventually being overtaken and killed.
Yeah. R.I.P.
Rick and Jonathan find a drunken pilot, Captain Winstock Havelock, played by Bernard Fox, who we met him in the bar earlier. He has a death wish. He just wants to die in a blaze of glory. And I'm like, why would you fucking get in an airplane with this maniac?
I know. I know.
They hire him to fly them to Hamunaptra. Jonathan and Ardith Bay are strapped to wings on either side of the plane because there's no room in the actual plane. Like
Right.
Rick is in the gunner seat. It's just whatever. It's a throwaway moment. It's silly. They are passed by a massive dust devil, which turns out to have been Imhotep, carrying Evie and Benny with him back to Hamunaptra. Now, as the plane approaches, Imhotep sends a sandstorm upon them, which forms the face and mouth from the poster. It's so cool looking. It looks great by today's standards too.
He does. I don't know. Have you seen the second one at all recently?
Not in many years.
I was like, I haven't seen the second one in a long time, but I think that there's a scene similar to this in the second one. Because I know in the second one they have like they have that weird like hot air balloon type of
Yeah.
ship that they fly around on.
Right.
They do a similar scene, but with water.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
I seem to remember that unless I'm like combining two different movies, but I think he does the same thing, but he does like a big wall of water in the second one.
It's a cool power,
Yeah,
you
for sure.
know?
Yeah.
So the big mouth in the sand swallows the plane. They're kind of tail spinning, and Evie kisses Emotep to distract him, and this stops the sandstorm. The plane crashes in the distance and then sinks in quicksand, along with Winston, the pilot, who goes down in his blaze of glory. And they literally salute him. It's like nothing.
I know. They're like, oh, well, thanks for the ride. It's like the Uber
Yeah.
driver. They're
Right,
like,
right.
oh, he's dropping us off. Meanwhile, he's dead and going into his sinkhole.
Right. It's what he wanted. It's the way he wanted to
Yeah.
go. As they try to enter the catacombs, stupid Jonathan messes with a scarab beetle, which burrows underneath his skin. Rick cuts it out with a giant knife, throws it across the room, and then shoots it.
Love it.
Evie and Emotep hear the gunshot, and Evie says, O'Connell, like she knows he's
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
So Emotep sends an army of temple priests. They're now mummified. They look fucking great. Now,
It's
some of them are practical, some of them are CGI, but when they're getting killed and like Brendan's fighting them, they look terrific.
yeah, it's
Even
great.
by
It's
today's standards.
yeah, I love it.
Rick, Ardith Bay, and Jonathan discover the treasure room, and it's massive. Think like the Cave of Wonders in Aladdin, kind of.
Right? No, very, that's a really good callback. Yeah, that's very true.
They are quickly attacked by the priests as Evie realizes she has been shackled to a sacrificial altar next to the mummified corpse of Anaxunamun. Imhotep approaches and opens the Book of the Dead, while Ardith Bay fends off the priests, and Rick and Jonathan dig for the golden book of Amun Ra under the statue of Horus. And Benny begins to make off with treasure. He's loading up a camel, and I read that the camels hated Kevin J. O'Connor throughout the entire film. They reacted poorly. They wouldn't do anything that he tried to get them to do, and no one could figure out why.
Well, maybe he was too method and they could sense it.
Right. I mean, honestly, based on his performance in Lord of Illusions, I think he's very much a serious actor, a great
Yeah,
actor who got pegged into character work, you know?
right.
So Ardith Bay appears to sacrifice himself for the greater good to go off and fight the priests. Now, as Imhotep reads from the book, Anaxunamun's soul begins to enter her mummified corpse, reanimating her. Jonathan busts in with the book just before Evie is sacrificed with the blade. They can't get it open without a key. Imhotep has the key in his robes. Rick battles the priests. Again, it looks great, and Evie begins to free herself. More priests approach. These ones are armed with shields. Anaxunamun attacks Evie. So the mummy of the girlfriend is now fighting with Evie, chasing her around. Jonathan's trying to read from the golden book, and when he does, he discovers he can control the priests in doing so. So he commands them to kill and destroy Anaxunamun, which they do, again, through a cool shadow.
I think that
shot.
also, I think Anaxunamun might be my favorite mummy in this movie. I think
Honestly, yeah.
I think she's so scary because this one is a real person, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And she is the more traditional, like wrapped in gauze, but her like black hair is sticking out.
Yep.
And she looks like there's something about seeing all, like, I don't know, for me personally, something about seeing all the tattered fabric, like, and you can see like the blood got, like, it is a little, she is a little oozy in this.
Yeah.
And that was really scary to me. And I remember as a kid, I'm like, ooh, nope, I'll take on anyone but her. I don't like that. And I don't like the hair coming out.
No.
I don't like it in a great way, is what I mean. Like they did
Right.
it. She's very scary.
Well, and Rachel does a great job of interacting with her and screaming and running and fighting back a little bit, but like she, she makes you believe it as well.
Yeah, yeah, I love it.
Well, and that just speaks to the importance of having a practical effect in front of you. Whereas in Marvel movies, people comment that, like, even the actors admit they have no idea what they're battling. They don't see what these creatures look like until the movie's over.
I mean, we could have a whole episode about practical effects because I know as horror fans, like we are like the biggest people that are proponents of using practical effects because it just ages so much better. Like even if yes, you can tell obviously that it's a stunt or whatever, you can tell that it's fake, obviously, but you can see the artistry behind it and you can see how it still leaves you wondering, okay, how exactly did they get to do that? If you watch The Thing, it's like amazing. It's like all that to say practical effects are really cool.
We love them. We love them here.
A tangent. There's my tangent for the day.
All right, so Anaxunamun has been killed. This infuriates Imhotep. Jonathan gets his hands on the key as Rick battles Imhotep. So Evie tells him to like keep him distracted. So it's like a pro wrestling style battle. Like Rick is getting picked up and fucking thrown across this room and beaten up, and it's keeping Imhotep busy. Evie reads from the book, And just as Rick gets his hand on a sword and thrusts it into Emotep's torso, she finishes the phrase, and this turns Emotep mortal. And so the sword inside of him does him in. And he backs into this pool of Tari souls. Uh,
Kari's. Yeah.
and he is slowly devoured and destroyed by them. And he mutters the phrase in ancient Egyptian, death is only the beginning. She translates it for us, and he is consumed and begins to just decompose all over again. Meanwhile, Benny is attempting to make his escape with a sack full of treasure, but accidentally sets off a booby trap, setting the destruction of the entire city into motion. Jonathan stupidly drops the book. As they're running, there's no time to obtain it. He wants to stick around to get some treasure, and Evie's like, motherfucker, let's go.
Well, I love this bit that they do because he drops the book, and Evie, of course, being the librarian, runs to go get it. And Jonathan and Rick are like, no, 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 we gotta go. And then they go past the gold room, and then it flips, and Jonathan stops and he's like, oh, but can't we just get some gold? And Evie's like, no, 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 what are you doing? Like, I like that they show the contrast between the siblings in that scene.
That's a great point. I didn't even pick up on that. I love it.
Yeah.
Our heroes are running through the city. It's closing in on itself, but Benny is trapped behind and he gets locked in the room of treasure. His torch, oh, it's so upsetting. What a way to die in darkness. And his torch begins to go out as scarabs crawl their way through him. And as soon as it's dark, he screams and we hear the crunching sounds.
This whole last 10 minutes of the movie is so Indiana Jones.
Yes.
And one of the things that I loved is like when Benny is almost getting crushed, you can see the huge, like I would love to have seen that in person, like the giant, I don't know how you describe this, like one of the giant, like the ceiling's kind of slowly moving down, and you can tell it's a real giant set piece that he's kind of crawling under. And it's so massive. I'm like, this soundstage must have been so cool to see.
Yeah. And they utilize it well. Like they every square inch is decorated and it looks consistent, you know?
Yeah, and especially during the destruction of it, all these walls are moving and it's not CGI, it's real. Like, he's almost getting crushed by this moving ceiling and all this stuff. Like, it's a really impressive moment.
Yeah. Our trio runs through the crumbling city above ground and escape just in time for its like complete destruction. Like, this is what I picture Sodom and Gomorrah looking like when God's like sent his wrath down upon the sinners, because it's cool looking. They are startled by Ardith Bay, who survived. And Jonathan remarks, oh, we're going home empty-handed. Rick looks at Evie and he says, I wouldn't say that, as they kiss. And our heroes,
oh my gosh,
it's good. It's good. And they ride off into the desert sunset. And that's the end of the movie.
I love it. I love it. And the big sweeping score. I do want to give the score a shout out because the score in this movie is just so good. It's so epic. It's so epic. And like I said, it's so sweeping and orchestral, and it feels like old Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah. God, it's such a fucking killer movie. On the Rick or Treat Horrorcast, there is a rating system. A movie is either a trick, which means it's okay. It's a treat, which means you love it, or it is a smell my feet, which means it sucks. I feel like I don't even have to ask you, but Kyle, how would you rate The Mummy?
It's 100% a treat. 10 out of 10, no notes. Love it. Will continue to love it for the rest of my life. Absolutely a treat.
Agreed. There's so much rewatchability in this film. It's just like, I mean, maybe even like I just said about The Company of Wolves, it's a comfort film. It's familiar. It's easy to watch. And like you said, like I can sit down and pay close attention to this, or I can have it on in the background while I'm doing dishes, or, you know, like I'm happy to enjoy it either way. It's just like, it's the definition of a swashbuckling popcorn film.
100%. And it's one of those movies that like it's also a great way to describe it. It's like a road trip movie. Like I'm pretty sure I watched this movie on every single road trip I ever had in my entire life. Like when those like little portable DVD players came out, like I burned this disc. My Mummy DVD was probably so scratched and tattered because I watched this everywhere, because it's just a crowd pleaser. And I think when we were talking about if they were to do a third one, it would be well received. And I think that's because, or a fourth one, I should say. I think it's because this movie is so beloved by people our age. So like millennials, or maybe a little younger than millennials, or whoever, you know, ages, let's just say 25 to 35, people tend to really love this movie. And I think it's because we grew up with it. We feel very attached to it. And because it is so fun. And people probably did rewatch this movie a bunch of times growing up. And for a lot of the queer communities, we've already said, like, this movie was such a sexual awakening, because you found out you liked girls, that you like guys, or you liked both.
Yes. 1000%. echo literally everything you just said. It's just a treat and a half, and I think it deserves like its lasting praise after all. Literally, when you said 25 years, I was like, fuck, I'm so old.
Yeah.
It's just a classic, and I hate to sound like an old grandpa, but like they don't make movies like this anymore.
Oh my
This is
God.
kind of the
I
end of an
yeah.
era,
I
right?
again like the big Hollywood epics, and of course we have action movies now, but they're more franchises. And yes, you can argue that The Mummy is a franchise, but the original one was a loose remake that also those things weren't happening as much in the 90s as it was now. So it was a bigger deal. And like they just don't make these kind of, in my opinion, it's a very original, kind of epic adventure.
Mhm.
And don't really take gambles like that anymore.
No,
And
movies are a lot more calculated now and based
yeah,
on exactly what they think people want, and it's seldom what people actually want. But they
yeah,
make money regardless, so that's why they keep pumping them out because people will
exactly.
pay to go see them
Exactly. And I
so
think
that they can bitch about it on social media.
right, exactly. And I think a lot of things that we also talked about is like, and then we've hit on, I know several times, but again, just like the kind of the richness that this movie feels with, the sets and the costuming and the locations. Like you just don't get a ton of epic adventures that really are really world that really invite you in the way this movie does, or
Yeah,
the movies used to really
yeah.
bring you in and like kind of transport you. You don't get that as much anymore.
You use the word richness, and I think that's a perfect way to describe the look and feel of this movie. It feels
Yeah.
very lush and very just immersing. I
It
mean,
feels-
like Rachel, she doesn't consider it a horror film. She feels like it's in a comic book world. I will agree with that, but
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
more like the Joel Schumacher Batman comic book world, than like the modern day Dark Knight, like
Yeah.
scary, upset, cynical comic book world.
It's
It's just
definitely, yeah,
fun.
it's not a horror. I would not really I would like a horror adventure or a thriller,
Yeah,
with of course it's horror by nature because we're dealing with dead people coming back to life. So that's horror by definition, I suppose. But it's such an adventure movie.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, God, Kyle, I'm again so grateful. I knew we would have a great time. I'm so glad we had so much fun. Where can my listeners stalk you?
Oh, please stalk away. I am on TikTok at ScreamKingKyle is my username. So I post all about horror movies. I post about sometimes just nostalgic feelings and movies from the early 2000s and 90s in general. But yeah, I love horror movies, and you can follow me on Instagram. It's my Instagram is at Kyle Trevor, which is more my personal page. I do post about horror movies, but really if you want horror stuff, go to my TikTok.
Excellent. And please do, because Kyle is always entertaining and a real delight. And I just can't thank you enough. I had such a great time.
Thank you. No, seriously, thank you. This is such an honor, and I will do this anytime. I had the best time geeking about Brendan Fraser.
You are welcome back literally anytime. Thank you. Listeners, you can follow the podcast on all platforms at Rick or Treat Pod. Check out the YouTube. Just type in Rick or Treat Horrorcast. And that's our show. Thanks again, Kyle. And we'll see y'all later, spookies.
Bye.
Thanks for coming Rick or Treating. It'd be a real scream if you'd take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. The show's spooky intro and outro music is a cover of Camille Saint-Saëns's Danse Macabre with orchestrations composed and performed by Lestat von Monlicht. My website, rickortreat.com, is designed and maintained by Evelyn DeVere. The show's social media content is created by my evil minion and social media manager, Stanley Martin. The Rick or Treat logo was designed by Philip Romano. Contact information and links to these artists can be found in the episode description. Check them out, they're frighteningly talented. Rick or Treat Horrorcast is independently produced by me, Ricky J. Duarte of Rick or Treat Productions. If you like what you heard, tell a fiend. Friend. If you didn't, well, they're coming to get you, listener.